and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. One thing that has been a hot topic lately is the border issue. And, you know, the border issue is not something that's new. It's something that's been argued and debated for a long time, and being a libertarian, I think borders are government control lines, and you know, I was thinking about it today, and another little bit of news that came up made me start thinking about it. And you know, one thing that a lot of people, and including Ron Paul, actually argued back in 2011. It's something that a lot of us have argued for a long time, that the border, you know, building a fence, all this, I understand there's people that have a lot of passion behind securing the border and all that, but I think we lose sight on what that really means. It's government control again. It's a government border, dividing what government's controlling you. And when you look at it in that sense, you realize, well, the border can be used, you know, a border fence can be used against us. And I want to start off with a real quick clip, just Ron Paul talking about border fence, September 7th, 2011, one of the presidential debates. So let me cue this up here.
But people who want big fences and guns, sure, we could secure the borders. A barbed wire fence with machine guns, that would do the trick. I don't believe that's what America is all about. I just really don't. We can enforce our law. If we had a healthy economy, this wouldn't be such a bad deal. People are worrying about jobs. But every time you think about this toughness on the border and ID cards and real IDs, think that it's a penalty against the American people, too. I think this fence business is designed and may well be used against us and keep us in. In economic turmoil, the people want to leave with their capital, and there's capital controls and there's people control. So every time you think of a fence keeping all those bad people out, think about those fences maybe being used against us, keeping us in.
So, you know, well, let's actually look at that. Keeping us in. One thing is maybe harassing people. Let's harass people. That way when they come back into the country, maybe they just don't feel like they want to leave because they don't want to have to go through that crap anymore. They feel intimidated if they try to leave the country, but we got this free open border down south. Well, that's for the immigrants, and it's being used for political reasons. That's the only reason why I see it as a bad thing. But what other people don't realize is these people are coming in. They are going to be here. I don't see the ability for you to just be able to deport them all. I don't see that happening. I really honestly don't. But being the people that are negative towards these people, if you decide to be negative towards these people, to shout them down, tell them, get out of my town, you're the negative ones, and they're not leaving, you further that political motive that is behind bringing them in. But back to, well, how does the border affect us? How does border control affect us? Well, there was an article out of Ben Swan, and I've seen it this morning, and I guess it actually hit Judge, hit the front page of Judge, I guess. So I guess congrats on that. But this is an interview. It's exclusive. Leader scout troop confronted by armed border patrol speaks out. And I listened to this interview, and well, what you just heard from Ron Paul really starts ringing pretty true in this. So let me get this queued up here. Take a quick second. Okay. It's loading up here.
This is Joshua Cook from benswan.com, and I'm talking with Jim Fox, and he is the Scoutmaster for Boy Scout Troop 111 and located in mid-Iowa. And earlier this month, they went out and they did a camping retreat along the Alaskan-Canadian border. And Jim Fox, first, thanks so much for letting me reach out to you. And I just want to, maybe you can tell the audience exactly what happened at the checkpoint.
Well, we've been in Canada for 10 days, and the boys enjoyed Canada immensely. But 15 kilometers outside the border, going into Alaska, we stopped to change into our scout uniforms, and the boys were jazzed. They were excited. They were going home to America. So we pulled up to the checkpoint. I was the first man, and the agent was just rude. But, you know, the world's full of rude people, so I just kind of blew it off. He just pull up over there. So I did, and the second man came through, and one of the boys had been taking pictures for 10 days, and he wanted to have a picture of him entering America. So he took a picture of the border agent, which immediately threw the border agent into a frenzy. He immediately confiscated the camera, told the boy that he was subject to 10 years in prison and or $10,000 fine, told the driver to pull over, bring all 5 boys in the van and himself inside. Well, then the adult said, well, I'm not the leader of the expedition. It's Jim. I need to go get him. He says, fine, go get him. So for, 3 or 4 minutes, the boys are inside the Border Patrol unattended with his agent. So I get up there, and here's this Border Patrol officer going through 1,208 pictures that this young man has taken. And the other agent comes up and says to me, "Are you the leader of this group?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Why do your boys have so many matches, lighters, and pocket knives on them?" I went, well, because, one, I trust these boys, and two, they're Boy Scouts, and three, we give 7-year-old tiger cubs their first pocket knife. And I said, I trust these boys. But let's be honest, they are boys, they're teenage boys. And he goes, well, when I was a scout, our leaders had much better control over us than you have over these boys. And I knew exactly what he was doing. He was baiting me. He wanted to get a reaction from me, and I did not give it to him. And then he goes, I'm going to go out and search the van. So I follow him out. And he says, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm going to watch you search the van. He said, this isn't your van. I said, yes, it is. All 4 vans are registered in my name. And he goes, well, you can't watch me do this, because then you will know our search techniques, and you will turn that information over to the undesirables. So you have a choice. You can go in one of the other vans and sit down, or go back inside. Fine. I walk away, and as I'm walking away, he gets up, goes to the other 3 vans, because the boys had gotten out at this point, kind of stretching their legs and stuff. And he says, the next scout that gets out of a van, I will handcuff and detain all of you. So all the boys get back in the vans, obviously. I go back inside. At this point, he's done with the camera. Well, after the guy got done searching the van, according to the boys that were still outside, he went over to the 3 vans and said, I'm looking for the bag of this particular scout. So one of my boys go, hey, I know exactly where it is, pops out of the van, climbs up on the roof where the bags are. He hears the holster on the snap. He turns, and this agent has his gun out, pointing it at him.
What was the reaction of the other boys seeing the gun?
Everyone else was in the van, but this scout and another one, and those 2 were scared that one, he was going to shoot him, and so he climbed off, got back in the van. The other scout got back in the van, gets the bag, and starts going through it up at the border crossing. And I'm thinking to myself, who in their right mind is going to search a bag of a teenage boy that has been on the road for 10 days? I thought, you know what? There is karma in this world. So, he proceeds to search this bag, and the agent inside says to me, he says, where were your parents born? I said, Michigan. Where were you born? I said, Illinois. What do you do for a living? And I said, I work for a school district. What do you do? I said, I happen to be the purchasing agent for the food. Goes to the other adult that was still there and says, what do you do? And he says, oh, Air National Guard. Part-time, right? He goes, no, I'm full-time Air National Guard. He goes, well, you can leave, and those other 4 boys, they can leave. So they leave, and what I'm thinking is, the only way he knew those boys had pocket knives and lighters in their pockets is that when we were not in there with him, he searched them. The only thing I can think of.
And just to describe, what are these boys? Do they look intimidating? Do they look like domestic terrorists?
They're in Boy Scout uniforms. They're sitting there scared to death.
Now, you said they pulled you over. They searched the bags. One pulled a gun out. Here you are. You're doing patriotic Americans. These boys are Boy Scouts of America.
Right.
Did you feel at that moment? Did you feel like it was still America?
No, I didn't, and neither did the boys.
Now, you made a statement to the media. The boys were unnecessarily frightened and intimidated.
Yes.
When and then you say, when do we Americans decide enough is enough? That TSA and the border guards are a valuable asset to the safety of this country, but to have such Gestapo tactics against a teenage scout is uncalled for.
That's true. That is true.
And
I've taken these guys on more than one trip. I've taken them to Florida. We've flown through Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Key West, and every time we fly, whether it's flying out of Des Moines, whether it's landing in one, and flying back out, the Eagle Scouts that I have with me are taken aside, and they are going through a full search. Their bags are emptied. They're given the full pat down. Their belts are taken off. They're patted down. They're run through scanners. In Orlando, we had one of the Eagle Scouts was, believe it or not, I'm shocked they left his clothes on as much as they patted this kid down. He walks away after they're all done, drops his boots. An Orlando police officer came up to me and another leader and said, I don't know what happened. I don't care what happened. But if that boy doesn't calm down, I'm going to arrest him and remove him from this airport. And I said,
wow.
What did he do? He dropped his boots in a threatening manner. I'm like, okay. I have less than 20 minutes to get to our flight. I have got 24 boys sitting at the gate waiting for us. I really didn't have a whole lot of choice but to go, great, we're leaving. But that's what's happening. That is what's happening. I mean, and then when he brings out this kid, the guy who took the picture, he gets his eyeglass case out of his bag, and he scrapes it for drugs, puts it in that little baggie with the liquid in it, and you know how they shake it to see what kind of drugs are there?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't shake it, he just flicks it with his finger. And he says, I suppose you wonder why we're doing this. And I went, yes. He goes, it's our job to protect this border. It's our job to keep the terrorist, as he's pointing at this 15-year-old boy, from crossing into America.
Wow.
And he said, you cannot take a picture of a federal agent. You cannot take a picture of a federal building. It is the law that you can. And I'm thinking in my head, I don't see any signs. I don't see anything that says this. But again, I knew he was baiting me, and he was waiting for me to get in his face so he could,
right.
Arresting a 15-year-old boy, he wasn't going to, get anything. But the adult, he could take down.
Yeah.
And I knew we only had 4 drivers. We only had 4 vans. What was I going to do with the boys that were in the 4th van then? What was I going to do with, that trip would be over. We'd have to be contacting their parents and, look, you got to fly up here to Fairbanks, you got to pick them up, on and on. And that wouldn't be fair to the boys. So when we left, when he finally let us go, out of the goodness of his heart, by the way, he says, I said to the boys, put all your cell phones in your pockets, get in the vans, don't say a word. Just get in, let's go. We get to 3.5 miles down the road, there's a campsite there. The boys are exhausted, they haven't eaten. The next town's 90 miles away. The people fed us and got us a campsite. And I sat with the boys before they all went to bed. And I said, now listen, don't talk about this. Don't get on social media. Shut all your internet off. Let's just not talk about this. I'll talk about it with you later when we leave this area. Well, that next morning we got up, and there was wireless at this Happy New Year's place. So that's when I posted my message on Facebook. And I sat around with these 18 boys, and I said, now listen, I've taught you all about citizenship. I've taught you that if you're school board elected in your town, you need to vote. If it's a city, you need to vote. I don't care if it's, are we going to allow chickens in the neighborhood? You need to go vote. You cannot sit idly by. And the problem that's happening here is that we all think we're safer because we can't take liquids on a plane. We have to take our shoes off. We have to take our belts off. We have to submit ourselves. I said, here's what's wrong. That's why this is happening. Because we think we're safer now by you guys going through this. And these boys are like, but Jim, we just wanted to come to... I said, I know. You just wanted to come home. I get it. Here's the deal. I'm going to fight. Mm-hmm. You guys will have absolutely nothing to do with this. I will not anyone talk to you. I don't care. And at that point, I hadn't even told the parents yet which of the 2 boys were, the one that had the camera and the one that had the gun. Because after I made that post, I mean, all of a sudden everybody's going, was it Johnny, was it Bobby, was it Larry, and I said to all the parents, I said, at this time, we're going to go on with our trip. All the boys are safe. All the boys are fine. We're just going to move on, and I'll fight the good fight. And since that saying, that particular post has been shared, I don't even know how many times it's been shared.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Senator Charles Grassley I believe he's your senator in Iowa.
Yeah, it's true. Right.
He said it's outrageous that a border agent would point a gun at a Boy Scout just for taking a picture. It doesn't make sense. Do you think, whether it's the TSA or the border, do you think they're like targeting the Boy Scouts unfairly, or do you think every American is experiencing
I think they're targeting all of us law-abiding citizens, the one that go to work, pay their taxes, pay their bills, raise their families, whether they're in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or 4-H or whatever, involved with our kids. We're the ones being targeted.
Now, let me ask you this. First, as far as your Fourth Amendment right, unlawful search and seizure, do you think that, you believe your Fourth Amendment rights were violated?
Oh, totally. And they knew there was only 4 drivers. They knew we only had 4 adults. They had me by the, proverbials at this point. Mm-hmm. And the one adult who was stopped in the original van said to me later, he said, "I'm glad you handled it. Yeah. I'm not sure I would have been as calm." I said, "Well, if these guys get this border crossing, think I'm going to shut up." Mm-hmm. I have no intention of shutting up.
Let me ask you this. Is there any video footage of this?
According to the CBP, there's a 47-minute video that was taken, and it proves to them that there was not one time an agent ever unholstered or removed his gun from his holster. And I said, "Well, is there any audio on that?" And he goes, "No, there's no audio." I go, "Wait a minute. You just told me there's 36 cameras at this outpost, right?" "Oh, yes." And all of a sudden, there's no audio. No, there's no audio. We want you to see this video, Jim. I said, fine. This was last Wednesday. I was talking to the section chief of the Border Patrol from San Francisco. He said, "We want you to see this, and then you can make your own decision." I said, "Okay. We want you to meet us at the Federal Building in Des Moines, and then we'll let you view the video. We'll contact you later today by email or tomorrow to let you know what time we're going to do this and what date." I said, fine. Friday of that week, I still haven't heard from them, but the Inspector General's Office of Homeland Security contacts the Boy Scouts of America here in Iowa and says to him, "Hey, we just want to solve this problem, so we want to set up interviews with all the boys and their parents. 30 to 45-minute interviews, and we're going to do this at the council office, the Boy Scout offices." And the Boy Scouts are like, "Yes, we want to get to the bottom of this, too." So they contact me, the Boy Scouts contact me, said, "Jim, could you set the parents up?" And I'll be honest with you, Josh, since I got home a week ago Sunday, I maybe sleep an hour or 2 hours a night.
Yeah.
And I stupidly read the email and went, "Okay, fine." So I sent a message to the parents, "Hey, give me a call. These people want to talk to you." And gave them the agent's number. And then a couple hours later, I went to go visit some of the parents because I was just conflicted with this. And I realized I know what they're doing. They want 18 different stories about what actually happened. And it would just say, "Well, look, it's just a bunch of kids that got upset about something. We told him not to take a picture, and he did anyway, so we just kind of slapped him on the hand." I knew exactly what they were doing. So I told the parents, I said, "Here's the deal. All interviews are canceled. Not one kid's going to go." And the parents are like, "Okay." Call the agent, and he says to me, quote, "Jim, I'm glad you called. I want to set up a time to visit with you." And I said, "You're not going to be glad that I called you, because as of right now, you have no interviews scheduled." "Oh, no, we have 7 so far." I said, "They're all canceled." Well, the parents have given us, doesn't matter. Not one scout's going to show up. So if you want the truth, talk to me. He goes, well, fine, 11 o'clock on Wednesday. So I took the day off for tomorrow, because this has gotten so bad, my school district is starting to go, you can't talk to anybody anymore. You have a job to do. And I'm like, I agree, I have a job to do. And so I told my boss, I'm going to take Wednesday off, take a personal day, and just, go meet with these people. Then Jeremy Oliver called me from a One American News Network. And I did an interview with Rick, somebody, I can't remember his last name. And then Jeremy called me back, and he said, Ken, I've contacted the Rutherford Institute, and they're going to represent you. And here's their number. So I called the Rutherford Institute, and they said, Jim Fox, I said, yes, you are not going to that interview tomorrow. We are going to represent you pro bono, and we are not going to allow the federal agents to interview you without us there.
Right, yeah.
So tomorrow morning, I will be their attorney from Virginia is calling me at 10:30 my time, and we're going to discuss everything, and then I'm going to walk into the interview with this attorney on the phone and tell the agents, unless I have an attorney present, I have nothing to add or nothing to answer.
Right. So as far as did they send you this video footage, or is this just something they told you that?
They told me, and I've never seen it.
So you've never seen it. So are they going to send it to you?
They, according to the guy from Homeland Security, they're not going to show it to me.
Okay. Do you know if this person that's going to represent you, are they going to request a FOIA request to get this video?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But they and everybody else have requested it.
Yeah.
Fox News has requested it. CNN has requested it. Washington Post. Everybody that has been in contact with me has requested this video, and Senator Grassley has requested this video.
Right. Oh, okay.
And he has been told no.
Really?
Yes. Everyone that's requested it said no, we're not releasing that video.
Wow. What is have you been in contact with Senator Grassley's office? Any new information? Or?
I talked with his office today, and they couldn't do anything until I signed some papers allowing them, they're having my permission or something. I don't really understand it, but I filled out the paperwork and I faxed it to him this afternoon, but I didn't do it for my work fax because I'm trying, I really kind of like my job, Josh,
Right.
But I also am not going to allow the government to intimidate me so, well, if we push him hard enough, he'll lose his job, so he won't go any farther. You know what? I'm 62. I've put up with shit all my life.
Yeah.
You're not going to, if I lose my job, I lose my job. But I'm not going to give up. The fact that these young men, who, like I told you earlier, who I have taught about their rights as a citizen, but their responsibilities as a citizen as well. And I said, too many of us Americans sit at home going, it's just a school board election. It's just a presidential election. It's just a midterm election. I said, you have to be willing to get up and get off your butt and go over there. Who should we vote for, Jim? I don't care. I don't care who you vote for. But find out who is on the ballot. Find out what their policies are. Find out what they're thinking. And if in 2 years they win, and after 2 years they say, you realize that they've done nothing they claim, fire them. Go vote for somebody else.
Yeah.
These boys, I've had 35 Eagle Scouts since 2005. And these young men, 7 of them in the military, 5 deployed, including my own son. He was deployed to Afghanistan for 14 months. I've had him in Kuwait, I've had him in Bahrain, I've had him in Afghanistan, I've had him in Iraq, I've had him, These boys joined the military.
Yeah.
These boys come to see me at 28 years old. And I'm not putting myself out there as I'm the greatest human being in the world, but somebody's got to tell them. Somebody's got to tell them, get off your lazy butt. Go make a difference. Run for office if you don't agree. Do something. And
let me ask you this: in light of the open border, the southern border, the open borders, and the fact that drug cartels are able to go back and forth, no guns pointed at them, but they want to focus on keeping Boy Scouts, out and intimidating. It sounds like they were trying to sort of fight with you. Just in light of that, with everything that's going on, they choose to intimidate and bully one of the most patriotic groups, in the nation, like you described, the Boy Scouts of America. What's your thoughts on that?
It's frustrating. It's frustrating that we've given these thugs this kind of power. That they can, our government can let these, and I feel compassionate towards these young kids that are crossing the border. Yes. Should we help them? Yes. Help them go back home. Come across this border as a refugee. Come across this border as a legal citizen and go, yeah, I want to get away from Guatemala and the drug wars. I get that. But don't let us just stand there at the border going, oh, come on over. And then we have young men who believe in God, believe in America, believe, they say this every meeting. I pledge allegiance,
Yeah.
That's the way every meeting starts. We do flag retirements with tremendous respect. We talk about the fact that it is a piece of cloth, but what does it mean? And for our government to take these young men and illegally search, illegally seize, and pull a weapon on these kids, something is wrong.
Yeah. I think the contrast is just ironic. It's, you have maybe the same age boys, from Mexico or other parts of the world. They cross the border. The border patrols put them in nice, swanky hotels, but they put guns to our boys.
Right.
They intimidate our boys, our American boys.
These boys were scared to death to go from Alberta into Montana. Because they say, Jim, they've got your passport. They already know who you are. They've read your post. We know they've read your post. Are they going to arrest you at the border? And I said, boys, just relax. Just relax. Take a deep breath. They ask you a question. Answer the question truthfully. Yes, sir. No, sir. And we should be fine. And we were. But that question, whether or not they could go back into their own country.
Yeah.
Why are we teaching our 15-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old boys that, you can do everything right. You can join the Boy Scouts of America. You can join the Girl Scouts of America. You can join 4-H and FFA and all the great organizations that are out there that are teaching you values about America and about the land of the free and the whole thing. These are the boys that are now afraid to come back into their own country.
Wow.
Something's not right.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to wake up, whether it's the president, whether it's the Congress, whether it's the head of the Homeland Security. I don't know. Maybe it's just the Americans got to wake up and said, okay, enough's enough. When you start putting a gun on a Boy Scout for taking a picture, one thing I did forget to tell you, the fourth van, when it came through, the agent said to the lady who was driving the fourth van, do you have any illegal drugs to declare? And she goes, of course not. No. Well, you may as well come clean, because the two vans ahead of you have already admitted to bringing illegal drugs into this country.
Really?
Yes. Yes. This was nothing but a pure intimidation of some of the greatest young men I've ever had the opportunity to spend 23 days in a van with. And if you've ever spent 23 days in a van with teenage boys, God help you.
Is there any word of so this is standard protocol. Did you feel like it was maybe just one rogue bully? Do you think it's protocol?
I think it's protocol. I think it's protocol because it happened in Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Key West. It's happened in Des Moines at the airport before we get on a plane to fly to any of these other cities, where they're targeting these boys wearing a full-dress Boy Scout uniform. My troop wears red berets. When we were in Orlando, they took my red beret and the other boys and took them and basically took them apart to see what we were hiding in this red beret. Took our neckerchiefs off, took our slides off, took our belts off, took our shoes off. You know, you want to scan me? You want to feel me up, buddy? I've been alone for 7 years. Go ahead. Yeah. I'll take any port in a storm at this point. But to take a 15-year-old boy and then threaten to arrest him for putting his boots down in a threatening manner?
Yeah.
What is wrong with this country? You know, these aren't gang members. These aren't guys walking around with drugs in their pockets, which, you know, yes, they have knives. Oh, my God, a Boy Scout with a pocket knife. What a concept. A Boy Scout with a lighter. What would he be doing with that? I don't know, camp stoves, lanterns, light each other's farts. I mean, they're boys. What do you think boys are going to do with a lighter? They're not smoking.
Wow.
I happen to be a smoker, and I'm very honest with the boys about the fact that I smoke, and I've been smoking for 49 years, and the addictive values of it, and I tell them over and over again. They've seen me try and quit. But I'm not going to lie to them and say, yeah, I'm not smoking, and then go sneak out behind the van, because they know I'm lying. And boys understand, and girls at this age, they know an adult is lying to them. So I'm going to tell them, yes, I smoke, and I'm going to smoke in front of you. And it's a horrible habit. And to this date, of the 300-plus scouts, I think only one is smoking. You know? Yeah.
Well, so, this whole story, this whole story is pretty alarming. I appreciate you coming forward and getting this message out. I'm going to give you the last word, and just whatever you want to say. I appreciate what you're doing and teaching these boys the right thing, and that America is not supposed to be like this. It's supposed to be founded on the Constitution, which protects civil liberties. And it seems to me, based on everything you said, I mean, your civil liberties were violated. Now, there's a myth about this Fourth Amendment free zone along the border. That to me is a myth, and it's totally a violation of our constitutional rights. I'm going to go ahead and give you the last word.
The last word I have is I believe in our youth. I believe that our youth is going to start to wake up and see what's been happening to this country. I believe that boys like in the Boy Scouts, girls in the Girl Scouts, kids in 4-H and so on and so forth, they're a lot smarter than we like to think they are. And they see these abuses over and over and over again. And I believe that they are going to be our salvation, because they're going to run the scoundrels out. They're going to be the ones that are standing up and saying, enough's enough. My final word.
Well, listen, please update us on, I know this is, this story is ongoing, as far as, this Rutherford group that's going to represent you, and also let us know if that video is released, or any updates with Charles Grassley as well. But I would love to follow you up, whenever new information emerges. This is this is like a big issue right now, and
it is.
Unless we fight back, it's going to get worse.
I know, and we've got to. We as Americans have got to say, you know what the hell are you guys thinking? And we need to fire everybody in D.C. And I don't care how good or bad you are. We need to fire every one of you and start over. And we need to start at the top and work our way down to the house and get rid of you. I'm sorry, you've been there for 2 years and you haven't fixed this shit. You're done. Get out.
Yeah.
And Senator Grassley's been a great senator for the state of Iowa. Harkin's been a great senator for the state of Iowa. The people that are putting up to run against him, they want to be there 30 years too.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I'd love to be in my job 30 years, but it ain't going to happen. Yeah. And I won't get the benefits. So
and the thing is, these unelected bureaucrats.
They're the worst.
There's no accountability in the Department of Homeland Security. Look what Benghazi. I mean, we're not getting anywhere with that. The gun runnings of Fast and Furious. I mean, no heads are being rolled. I mean, no one's accountable. I hear the passion in your voice, and I appreciate you standing up, and I think that you're teaching these young men something so valuable that they're not going to forget for the rest of their life.
Right.
So I appreciate what you do. You're a patriot, and thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Okay, and again, that was from benswan.com, exclusive leader of scout troop confronted by armed border patrol speaks out. And again, it's proof that this whole border thing, when you realize that government is not the people, then you understand the border is a control mechanism. They don't want you going out of the country and coming back in and going out of the country. No. And the only reason they're letting people in is for political reasons. And as long as you have the right attacking these people are being told. You gotta remember, these people are being told, yes, you can come to America and it'll be great, and you'll get citizenship, and they get here and they're met by these, border patrol that aren't able to take care of all these kids properly. And you, of course, you have gang members and stuff coming in too. Then on top of it, that they're meeting confrontational people that they might have not been told about this part. The situations that they went in thinking that they're coming to freedom, when they're met by those hostile things, it only furthers that political motive for bringing them in. That's one thing you really have to understand, because they don't intend on sending these people back. Just get that out of your head right now. We should send them back. Just get that out of your head right now, because the people in charge right now, the puppet masters and all that, they're not going to send all these. They might go, oh, we'll send these people back, or we'll send these. It's all going to be a front. We already know how government works. But you really have to understand that the political motives behind why they're bringing them in, and is your reaction going to further that or not? Okay. You really have to make your decision, no matter, what your belief is. Well, they shouldn't be. Well, they are. Now, are you going to make them an easy political enemy to further the numbers of people that intend on putting more restrictions on you? Remember, if they get complete control over everything, which they pretty much are getting complete control over everything, the number of people that come in, that doesn't worry them. When need be, they can make those people disappear. This is being used to keep everything Obama has done in place. And I don't see any good coming out of this. But while you're fighting for more fences and more control and machine guns and all that, look how the Border Patrol will treat you when you try to leave or come back. They don't like that. Okay. I had another one here. And this one, this is kind of a reflection since we were kind of in the kids area with the Boy Scouts. This one just popped up on my newsfeed while that interview was playing. Off the grid news, hospital threatens mom with arrest for taking picture of her own son. Says here, a hospital security guard threatened a woman with arrest and loss of Medicaid because she took pictures of her own son during a routine exam. The guard even told the woman, Mandy Wilson, that taking pictures with a phone constituted trespassing. The guard demanded she hand over the phone. Here's what's going to happen if you do not cooperate. I'm going to have to escort you off the property. We will trespass you, and then you will probably fire you as a patient. A security guard identified as Officer Perkins told Wilson. Staff at Mercy Hospital in Springfield, Missouri asked for Perkins' assistance after they observed Wilson taking pictures of her own son with her phone during an audiology exam. Perkins' remarks were part of a disturbing conversation secretly recorded by Wilson and posted online. The remarks, Wilson said, demonstrate a dramatic violation of her rights. In my mind, me not complying was letting him go through my personal property and my phone, Wilson told a television station. Perkins told Wilson it may be personal property, but was taken on these premises, which is my property. Wilson wanted to post a picture on a fundraising website for her son. Guard claims photography is illegal. Perkins claimed that Wilson had violated federal law called the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, which is popularly known as HIPAA. HIPAA mandates a set of privacy standards for medical records. Among other things, HIPAA makes it illegal for healthcare providers to share medical records without consent of the patient. It's unclear how taking pictures of her son would have violated the law. Per legal and HIPAA, no one is allowed to take any type of photography, video, audio, or still pictures on hospital property, Perkins said, even if it's like of your own child or whatever. It's just how the regulations are. When Wilson refused to go along with Perkins' orders, he began to threaten her. You're being trespassed for violation of HIPAA, Perkins said. I'm informing you now that you're being trespassed. If you come back on the property, you will be detained and taken to Greene County Jail. Because I took a picture of my son, Wilson asked, I was unaware that I couldn't take a picture of my son on my phone. Well, now you know, and now you're not cooperating because you won't let me see your picture, the security guard responded. Guard threatened to take her insurance. Perkins also told her that this has created several issues on the federal level and probably will be reported to Medicaid. Wilson told a local TV station that she thought he was threatening to take away her son's health insurance. I was scared. They were scaring me, intimidating me, and I don't know what they were doing with my kid. For some reason, my only thoughts were she's on Medicaid, so they're going to call CPS and report me to Medicaid, Wilson told TV station Channel 3030. Wilson committed no crime, defense attorney D. Wampler told Channel 33. Wampler noted that the hospital could only charge Wilson with a crime if it posted a sign prohibiting photography. The current legal doctrine in the U.S. is that photography is legal, protected free speech in public places and on private property that is visible to the public. The same doctrine states that photography can be disallowed in a building if a sign banning it is clearly posted. This is insane because I took a picture of my son, Wilson told Perkins, and an unidentified hospital administration. After the confrontations with Perkins, she left the hospital with her son and didn't return. It's easy to see why. It's just another show of force. Of course, they're going to try to push people around. They definitely don't want any mistakes ever to come out, so that's one way they would like to protect their mistakes from coming out. Okay. Let me find out. Okay, here we are. Got this one from the freethoughtproject.com. Jacksonville implements Orwellian police state going to 18,000 homes looking for drugs and guns. This week, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, again, why you should really pay attention, because you can actually vote for your sheriff. So when the sheriff does things like this, you can actually, get them out and put people in that will abide by your rights, not the government wills and political wills. It announced they would be installing new security cameras around the city and knocking on more than 18,000 doors without warrants as part of an initiative called Operation Ceasefire. I'm going to play this clip, and anything it doesn't cover, I'll read here. But I think it should cover it all. It's only about 2 minutes.
Sheriff Rutherford right now is walking through a northwest Jacksonville neighborhood, talking one-on-one with people about crime and how to prevent it. His walk is part of a new anti-crime initiative just unveiled a couple of hours ago. Operation Ceasefire, as it's called, will target a high-crime area, the police department's Patrol Zone 5. It covers northwest Jacksonville and parts of the north side and west side. Channel 4's Haley Winslow is joining us live. She just spoke with the sheriff about this new effort. Haley?
Tom, the initiative started in May, and part of the plan is to put cameras up in the most targeted areas. The cameras will be moved around, but it's to let criminals know these cops aren't messing around. It's been murder after murder, and Jacksonville Sheriff John Rutherford says it needs to stop.
There has to be a ceasefire in this neighborhood.
Bring on Operation Ceasefire, a JSO and citywide effort to prevent crimes before they occur and get illegal guns off the street before the murders. The sheriff says April brought 60 reported aggravated batteries and assaults involving firearms. He says the key to solving these crimes is connecting with the community.
You've got the amount of crime in your neighborhood that you're willing to tolerate. Because when you won't tolerate it anymore, you'll pick up a phone and you'll work with the police.
In the few weeks since the operation started, officers have knocked on 4,000 out of the 18,000 doors they plan to knock on in the Northwest community, asking for answers to unsolved crimes. They've seized 10 illegal firearms, 381 grams of cocaine, and 156 grams of marijuana. And city leaders say criminals, this is only the beginning.
I believe that they have decided that they have declared war on the community, and I think us coming together have decided that we will declare war for the people.
Mayor Alvin Brown also spoke about the importance of investing in our youth, giving them jobs, putting money in their pockets to keep them off the street and from getting in trouble. Reporting live, Haley Winslow, Channel 4, the local station.
So, what is your take on this? They have high crime. murder and all this, and it's just out of control. Does this give someone the right to decide to forcibly go door to door? And how do they know they're illegal firearms right off the bat? How do they know these people don't legally own it? How are they making these decisions? If you want to call in, chime in on this or anything we've talked about previously, or even add any information you have or stories you have that you would like me to cover, 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. There's a lot of questions, and you know what I wonder is, are all those guns that were confiscated illegal? How do they know they're illegal? Is it registered in your name? No, I bought it off a guy that was selling one. Well, it's illegal. You didn't register. You know, are they trying to play that game? You know, are they taking guns from law-abiding citizens and maybe pitting their lives in jeopardy in this assault on your rights? It's definitely in areas and pockets. It's definitely getting Orwellian. And I've seen when these recent police shootings in Indiana, and see cops coming out, we need to get these assault weapons. And this is, I'm in Indiana. This is a red state for the most part, but the anti-gun people are not holding back anywhere. And really, if you look at the violence, it tends to be in Democratic ran areas. And I'm not picking Democrats over Republicans, but Republicans tend to be more pro-gun. Tends to be a little bit more laxed on what people do. Not completely at all. They have their own problems, but there's a lot of issues that they are a little bit more laxed on. As, some liberals are more laxed on marijuana, but then want to take your guns because they want to say, well, since marijuana is legal and alcohol is legal, people can't be trusted with guns. But we got these people with these badges that go drinking and doing drugs and are caught. They can have guns. Okay, yeah, everything's upside down. I understand. We have to just, like this one, the sheriff, you have to go in there and vote for your sheriff and find a true liberty-loving sheriff. And then in places like that where maybe people can legally own a gun, that you go and maybe contact Armed Citizens Project and maybe get some shotguns to the legal gun owners. That way they can protect themselves. It's amazing the propaganda that they like to put out there to justify their crimes. Their crimes against people's rights. And it's just amazing. What else can you say? Give me a second here. Okay. Let me find it here. And since we were talking about the, immigration thing, I'm going to go ahead and play this one from Stefan Molyneux, The Immigration Crisis Propaganda Decoded. So, here we go.
Freedom Main Radio. I am here with Monica Perez. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
So you're mainstream media-ish, and yet, dare I use the A word?
Absolutely.
I've read with interest your blog post. I mean, how did this come about? It's quite a fascinating story. You were without hope, if I remember rightly.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I just lived in LA during Obama's first election campaign, 2008. And I noticed in so many windows were these literally Soviet-style posters, like color block posters of his face. And I remember thinking, how did this country get to where socialism is a marketable idea? And I just started to go back, like thinking of what were the turning points. Was it LBJ with the Fair Deal? Was it FDR with the New Deal? Was it Wilson with the World War I, which I think is a good candidate? But you can keep going back to the Civil War. You can even go back to just 8 years after the establishment of the country when they switched from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. And I started to realize that the American experiment only, and that if there is a central seat of power, it will. And I started to realize that the American experiment only, and that if there is a central seat of power, it will be corrupted just as easily as an individual who has whose power would be corrupted. So I just said, forget it. There's no hope. I'm just going to not worry about it anymore. And then I stumbled on an interview with Hans Hermann Hoppe on the Lou Rockwell show, and it said, democracy, the god that failed. And I thought, I'm sure he's just a communist. I'm sure it has nothing to do with this. But he had not only the same general idea, but there was hope in this concept that capitalism is self-ordering. And I gave it a lot of thought. I mean, I ironed out had to come to terms with the patents and copyrights and child safety and stuff like that. But I came to actually believe that capitalism is not only self-ordering, but not just theoretically are governments bound to be corrupt, but we have reached the point where the modern state really serves only itself, and that we actually have less peace and prosperity in the here and now than we would without government.
Well, it struck me many times that the American experiment in the late 18th century was specifically to create the very smallest possible government that you could have. And the result of that experiment has been by far the largest and most destructive government that the world has ever seen. That's not even missing a little bit. That's like, we didn't quite hit the bullseye. That's right. Like, the gun blew up and took out our whole town. It's just so off what was proposed.
I think it was a video of yours that I saw the concept that it's the lag, what you're experiencing, like the more freedom will give birth to the most oppression, because I think maybe your point was, or I certainly think a point is, that the surplus wealth, the way I think of it is the surplus wealth created by capitalism feeds the parasite class. It's not that government made the world safe for capitalism. It's that capitalism created the surplus for a parasite class. So the more of that surplus you had, the more freedom you had, the more you can feed this beast. And of course, we don't really want to think about it because, in my opinion, that power elite, the people who strive for power, is just like a 2% sociopaths. Like, I don't think it's human nature to want to fill that void, but it's definitely a consistent percentage of human beings who will always be there to fill that void, which I think is the ultimate question for narco-capitalism is there ever a time when all of humanity can be hyper-vigilant against power, make it a taboo like incest?
Right.
Never?
Well, I think that I don't think you can, I don't want the job of being hypervigilant. You know, like they say, well, you just have to keep your eye on the government 24/7, otherwise, and it's like, well, first of all, their incentive to grow is far greater than my incentive to resist them, because their growth gives them a whole lifestyle and power and visibility and wealth that is collectively preyed upon, and therefore I might lose a couple of bucks, but they gain millions, right? So that disproportionality of incentive means, like, forget it, I can't possibly, it's like trying to guard a heroin addict, you know, that their incentive to get heroin is huge, and your incentive to stop them getting heroin, while it might be large theoretically, is not driven by base biological desire. So, or like trying to control teenage sexuality, you know, I just don't want to be that guy who's, you know.
Or control, drug use or the borders. I always think that these are huge economic incentives that, unless you're willing to get super militant, but I think, I agree with you. I don't like the hypervigilance argument for we failed the Constitution. That's nonsense, because what we did was we gave all this power to a central government, and when people say anarcho-capitalism is a utopian fantasy, I say self-limiting government is a utopian fantasy. We've proven it's not possible. The best experiment that's humanly possible was done, and it failed in a big way. But I guess my lingering doubt, my lingering question is, and I'm really on the 1,000-year plan for people to come to terms with the fact that power cannot be, like, the right to self-defense can never be delegated. That I'm on the 1,000-year plan to think that that's going to work. But I can't help but feel, unless there is a real tragedy or a big crisis that makes it crystal clear, the cause and will keep people from accepting some kind of, to delegate self-defense in the future. That's my only very, very long-term problem.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if we have slave catchers in the past because there were slaves escaping. If in the future everyone rejects government as an institution, then you won't have a way of funding war through debt and inflation and all of this kind of stuff. You won't have subsidized bloodlust. You know, whatever you subsidize, you're going to increase. So the goal, of course, is like there's nobody who advocates slavery anymore because we've evolved as a species to understand how immoral it is. When the same thing occurs for centralized coercive control, it's self-defense against what? You know, once you no longer believe in the devil, then you don't buy insurance for exorcisms, you know? So that's sort of the goal, I hope. But again, I know that sounds utopian in the long term, but I think it's certainly doable. We've had these revolutions in the past. Why not more? We're not done. I mean, everyone thinks we're done. You know, we've reached the pinnacle of human existence. We can't possibly get better from here. It's the end of history. It's like, done? Really? Come on, look around the world.
Then you have a huge crisis. But there's one last thing I will say, because let's sound like I'm not totally the most fair answer, ethically correct possible one. I was reading an essay. It's like 75 pages. It was a book called The Report from Iron Mountain. Some people say it was a hoax. That's not important. But what it says in there, it was supposed to be a leaked government document. What it says in there, and it's very sophisticated analysis, it says that not that war protects society, but war is the central, and I think this seems like your position too, war is the central theme of modern society. And it says in there that if it weren't for war, people wouldn't accept the yoke of government. That these intellectuals concluded that actually the natural state is not to accept this, that we would have a revolution. We don't have to wait 1,000 years. We don't have to have establish a taboo, that it would just fall away if people weren't scared of something from the outside. So
yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, it is the fate of all sentient beings to fear what's beyond the firelight. You know, like you've got your firelight at night that illuminates 20 feet around, and then you've got these eyeballs and fangs out there somewhere in the darkness. And the idea that we need governments to protect us from governments is so circular. You know, because if there's no government, there's no invasions, right? You can't. There's no draft. There's no who's going to pay for it, right? Without the centralized coercive control. And so the fact that we need governments to protect us from governments is pretty much a circular argument. Now, if you give up government and everyone else keeps government, that's sort of a more challenging scenario, which is why it has to be philosophical rather than political, in my opinion. But, I mean, if everyone stopped believing in this stuff, then we wouldn't need to worry that much about invasion. And even if we did, or maybe space aliens come and want to use us as condiments for their space burgers or something, then okay, well, then we'll band together and come up with something intelligent. But The idea that
which
you need
can
a
do on
government
the fly.
has the right. Yeah, the idea that you need a government to protect your property and therefore give it the right to strip you of property is just crazy. It's like hiring a bodyguard to beat you up to make sure you don't get beaten up. I mean, this just doesn't make any sense, and therefore it has to have a lot of propaganda because it's so anti-sensical.
Right. Yes, I agree. Yes, nonsense.
Now, you've talked a lot about how you think libertarianism or voluntarism has a lot to contribute to the debate on immigration, which, of course, is seriously heating up. Obama's considering, there's lots of theories about this executive action to maybe give work authorization to 5 million illegal immigrants and so on, thus securing and cementing the Democratic voting base from here to eternity. What do you think libertarianism has to add to the immigration debate that you'd like to see more of in the mainstream?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that you can see libertarians deviate from a pure freedom-oriented. I mean, I recognize the right to free trade, free markets, free flow of capital, right to work, right to travel. I recognize all of that. But since we don't have those economic freedoms, even in this country, much less everywhere else, you have kind of bastardized incentives, and you can't look at the free flow as being the come to the optimal solution, which it would. So you have people like Hans Hermann Hoppe say, you can't let immigrants in because we've all paid for the roads already. But of course, we have probably more debt than the roads. You know what I mean? They're coming here not glomming onto our infrastructure, but taking on the burden of debt. So I don't buy that. And Ron Paul will say you can't have them come in because they take welfare. And I don't think it's that either. And this is what I think. I think there are huge economic forces at work. One is that welfare creates a floor under which Americans won't work. And that creates a black market for labor. So you're not going to get the guy, even though minimum wage isn't really binding, nobody's going to clean your house if they can figure out a way to get food stamps. I mean, there was one study that probably exaggerated a little bit out of Connecticut saying it takes $40,000 to get an American to work. $40,000 they could get from social services. That's, I think, an exaggeration. But let's just say that's this we were talking before about you're not really going to police drugs to the point where you kill the drug addict to keep him away from him. Like his urge or economic forces are so powerful that you have to be really crazy, really brutal to enforce it. So I see that as being a giant, a sucking sound of people coming in. And then you get only the most desperate, the people who are willing to crawl across the border to get shot or whatever. Whereas in a free immigration society, people would be crowded out. Of course, you'd have to get rid of that welfare floor. But here's something else that I think people don't realize is that internationally, in other countries, you need to have desperately poor people in order to make that trek. So I think things like capital controls in foreign countries, which create a virtual monopoly for the IMF to come in and just, there's this need for capital. The IMF comes in and gives it to the government, who gives it to their crony friends. It doesn't alleviate poverty the way it would if you went in and said, hey, I'll give you $10,000 to open a taco stand and I'll split the equity with you. You could, if there were economic freedom across borders, not only would you not have the attraction here, but people wouldn't want to leave their own country. So I think of it as a failure of free markets being bastardized or toyed with across the board. So when I see these people come in, I think, well, why are they coming? Well, because we created failed states in their countries through drug wars, for example. And if that's the problem, then why is the UN coming here and telling us that the UN has any? It does, but it claims it should be addressing the fact that these are failed states. That there are that our unfair policies create not only this skewed immigration situation here, but that it just feels like a river of migration coming from the poorest to us. And I think that it's all a function of government policy. So I'm not saying build a wall or let everyone in. What I'm saying is you can't pick and choose your freedoms. You can't exploit our libertarian tendencies to find your little when the big picture, these big flows, these big economic forces aren't going to stop unless you address the interference with markets overall, which I think kind of comes from the UN and stuff.
And there's things that policies that politicians have far more control over than the border. The border will never be secure. I think that's important. Like, you'll never stop drugs coming in. I mean, you can't even keep drugs out of prisons. So even if you turn all of America into a prison, drugs will still come in. You can't stop prostitution. You can't stop gambling. You can't stop illegal immigration. But you can directly stop those policies that are causing instability in foreign countries. And that is, of course, but that requires an order of magnitude of intelligence in your thinking, because people see, oh, they're pouring across the border. It's like, well, maybe if we stop the fire raging behind them, they'll stop coming in. But everyone thinks, well, we'll just seal these up. And it's never going to work. But you can stop giving money to the IMF. You can stop the war on drugs. These things can be done internally. You can stop selling arms around the world. You can stop firebombing or napalm bombing Colombian fields where you think there's cocaine. You can stop dumping subsidized agricultural produce on local markets, thus driving the local farmers out of business and turning them either to drugs or to emigration. You can do a lot of things to stem the source, but there's almost nothing, I think, that you can do to prevent where people are spilling over.
That's why I resent when the mainstream media propagandizes and the Republicans frame the issues for their political expedience. Like you were talking earlier about this notion of impeachment, of Obama, the White House, other people. It becomes a political weapon where people are for or against the wall, the wall between Mexico and America. But that's really not the issue at all, as you're saying. And you have to dig in, which is why, and this goes to an anarcho-capitalist concept, it's why like a democratic republic like ours shouldn't have such complicated policies, because we can't, as individuals, control it. And also the fact it's a problem with democracy itself, because if democracy is permitted, as it's been growing in this country beyond its original containment, it really shouldn't be able to take our rights away in this country, but really it can. So if you have that ability that an average person can vote, I mean, I understand individual votes don't count, but as a bloc, if you can have these movements move elections, take our rights away, all of a sudden you have to care about things like culture, which are no business of the government. You have to care that people are raised, which is why, like a lot of times, or mostly everywhere, citizenship goes with the parents, because you need to be inculcated from youth with the values to defend, say the Bill of Rights or whatever you think represent this small government, this unusual experiment that we have. Really takes an understanding of why it's ultimately the right way to go. But that's the problem with democracy. Now we have to care who comes over because they get to vote.
I would love to live in a world, Monica, where I didn't have to care about the opinions of other people so much. Wouldn't it be great? Like, I don't care if people like a movie that I think is bad or music that I think, I don't care. Go listen to your music, go watch your movie. But it's like with voting, it's like now I have to pay attention to the opinions of uninformed people. And isn't that really annoying? It's like you've got to let people who don't know which end of the violin to hold into the orchestra. It's like now you care about how well they play.
And then you're even more of a victim of things like the mainstream media, the political machine, these things that you have no control over, who are masterful at psychological manipulation. They're masterful. You have no hope telling your neighbor, hey, if you just were a libertarian, we'd be, better off. Your kids would be happier. That it doesn't matter at all what that person, and especially when you see it's not only manufacturing consent that they do, they manufacture advocacy. Like when you talk to the regular guy, he is defending the shadow government, whether it's from the Republicans or the Democrats. We need this or that. And it's like, look, it's us versus them. Why are you defending either argument, even with the immigration debate, either side? They're just using it for political expedience, yet the man on the street will get really angry if you try to strip that away.
Well, you lean over your fence with your neighbor and you say, with my few words shall I undo 15,000 hours of government school indoctrination and everything you see on the mainstream media and all the things you see in the movies. And it's like standing in front of a tsunami saying, stop, I have words. You're toast. I mean, it's so impossible.
That's why I don't really care so much about if people share my philosophy or even if people agree who's at the top. Like, people really get into, I mean, some people think interdimensional beings are really at the top in the halls of government. I'm not kidding. It's a totally, yeah. So you've got, like, Satanists, stuff like that at the top. And my argument is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a genuine true believer in socialism or libertarianism or interdimensional beings. Our real problem right now is that people don't recognize that they're being manipulated, brainwashed constantly with total untruth, that Fox, CNN, whatever, they're not just putting out news with a spin. Their goal is not at all to impart information, simply to persuade, to influence. That's all it's there for. And until people recognize that there's no kernel of goodness or truth in it, even though facts do get reported from time to time, it's only if it serves the purpose. And even facts get totally distorted.
Okay, so let's dive into something that you and I have both, I guess, reported on, which is the Malaysian flight. It was at MH17 that went down in Ukraine. So what's your take on what the media has been doing with that, and in particular the political media?
Well, I haven't seen your stuff on that, so I don't know if we'll disagree. But the one thing I will say absolutely about the media is, if I keep reading, this is what I believe. I believe that, say, let's take Fox News and RT, Russia Today, as two propaganda arms of government policy, let's say. I just assuming. So whatever the truth is, you're going to get from the one who happens to be right, and the one who happens to be wrong is going to spin the lies. So I don't take with faith the Russian version of the news or the American, but every time I look, somebody sent me this morning an email from The Economist, which really seems to present itself as a very sophisticated magazine for, bankers and stuff, and it went through what an unbelievable POS liar Putin is. It's unbelievable. He's like not a human being. Like, how can he think this way? He's such a liar, it makes you sick. And if you don't believe all the YouTube videos that John Kerry relies on, then you could just go back to the fact that this guy is trying to invade Ukraine. He's trying to take it over. He's annexing Crimea. And because every one of the articles ultimately goes back to this premise that Putin's interest in Ukraine is his expansionism, when you listen to, I assume you've heard it, the Victoria Nuland, Jeffrey Pyatt tapes, where the Assistant Secretary of State of the United States it was a 4 or 5 minute call with, it's never played in the mainstream media, but Jeffrey Pyatt, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, an ambassador, they have a conversation. This was leaked in the beginning of February, before the coup happened. I don't know when the conversation happened, where they discussed how they're going to put a puppet government into Ukraine, and if they don't get it to, what did he say? If it starts to gain altitude, when it gains altitude, Russia is going to try to torpedo it, explaining totally that that Russia's reacting to this. And also another call demonstrates very clearly that snipers killed police and activists in the Maidan in Kiev, whenever it was it February? And that's what sparked this violence. So it was, in all quarters, not a Russian, Russia didn't initiate it. And since the propaganda machine keeps going back to the thread that Russia initiated it, once you blow that up, they need to come up with a lot more evidence to convince me. But yet all they say is those people lie. That's all they say, is that Russia lies.
Well, the great thing, the great thing about being an anarchist is, there's no good guys, there ain't no bad guys. Right. It's like both these teams should be off the field and the people should play. Because, of course, the the guy's ex-KGB. I mean, he's got so much blood in his hands, he makes Lady Macbeth look somebody advertising for Dove soap. And the idea that he's somehow not going to do bad things, of course he's going to do bad things. And the American government, they dumped $5 billion in to destabilize the regime over the last 20 years. And Paul Kravik-Roberts has good arguments that they paid some of the protesters to go out and make things look bad. Proportional to population, I can't even imagine. That would be like Russia dumping, $50 billion into an organization in America specifically designed to overthrow the U.S. government. Hi, NSA. I always like to sort of throw that in when this stuff comes in. But, of course that would be something that the American government would react against.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes, I just wanted to point out that I heard about that $5 billion when Victoria Nuland came back from one of her trips in November or December and was recorded. It was normal recording. Not like a secret recording. It was a video recording of her presenting to Chevron and I think Exxon saying, hey, we're almost there. We put $5 billion in it. Just hang on. We're going to deliver Ukraine. That's insane to me. I mean, when people say these wars are for oil, it's just, to me, it seems so hackneyed. But then when you see our Assistant Secretary of State reporting to oil company executives from 2 different oil companies in a joint meeting, you just wonder who's calling the shots.
Oh, madness. Absolute madness. And how do you think that this is played into, or do you think this is the spin that came out of the downed airline in particular? How do you think that's played in?
Well, I think their number one, I have to say, it seemed to me that I never really accept incompetence as an argument when there's no motive. If there's any chance there's a motive, I never accept incompetence as an answer. So the West says that the rebels' incompetence led to the downing of this commercial airliner, which they would not benefit from. But if Kiev did it, they would get what I think, a couple of things, a kind of break in the momentum because the resistance was winning access to that specific area, if that had any tactical value. But what Fox News came out with, the minute I turned on the TV after I heard about MH17, they were telling us what needs to happen. And what they were saying was last night Obama came out with sanctions that Europe would not join. And unilateral sanctions have no effect, but worse than that, our big companies have really resisted this, told Obama, this is no good because that leaves a vacuum that European companies can fill and we will never get our place back. So we need Europe to join these sanctions. And then the next day, the big message, just repeated, was now Europe has to join the sanctions. Now, I read today in the Wall Street Journal, looks like Europe there are now at least factions pushing for, I think Merkel said, we have to forget our economic interests. This is a humanitarian, this is a moral question now. So they made it a moral question. I don't know. There's no evidence. We'll never know. We'll never have proof. Even if there were proof, we wouldn't know which one was real and which was not real. So I don't expect to crack the code. All I can say is who benefits.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts, now we get to put you in the dangerous territory of prognostication, do you have any thoughts about how things are going to play out in the region?
I really think in really, really big picture goals. I want, that's how I think. I never really know, 15,000 feet, maybe not even 30,000 feet, but I do feel like I have a grasp on 60,000 feet or at least some idea. And when Putin was pushing back on Syria, I still felt he was playing the gentleman's game. But when he leaked, I assume it was him, leaked these Newland Pyatt tapes about the U.S. ginning up this coup in Ukraine, I really felt like it was a game changer, like a paradigm shift, that Russia wasn't really in the club anymore. He was just not willing to take the second chair. And because I think originally my assumption, all evidence pointed to Russia, China, the U.S., the U.K., whatever, all kind of agreeing to share. They some people get bigger piece of the pie, some people get smaller piece of the pie, but everybody's kind of playing the same game because to have the whole pie at the top is just, who's going to rock the boat? It's like OPEC. It kind of doesn't make a ton of sense to have a cartel, but if everyone can get fat and happy, But now, I kind of wonder, and the only clue I found was Zbigniew Brzezinski, who tends to kind of lay out the big picture in advance, kind of softens up the more sophisticated audience, said he thinks that we're looking at a bipolar world of U.S. and China, and Russia has to play second fiddle. So I think the big picture goal is to force Russia to acknowledge it's not willing or able to really combat us on the world scale. And then beneath that, though, I think we always love to have, if we can't own a thing, chaos is just fine. Like, we're totally happy to have Central Asia, a complete mess so China and Russia don't have the oil. We're never going to get their oil. That oil, probably, we're not going to dominate that region. But if we can just, break down the walls and let radical Islam flood into Central Asia, those people lose control. Any kind of chaos, I think, to us is almost as good as actual control. So if Ukraine devolves into chaos on the border of Russia, that's good enough, I think, for the people who want to make sure the power stays to the west. But do I think Russia will invade Ukraine? I don't think they want eastern Ukraine. So,
well,
you think
it's a lot of debt and a recalcitrant. Well, no, it's a lot of debt and it's a recalcitrant population. And so why would they have a beneficial economic relationship with Ukraine as it is? As long as they have influence over the government and can tax, why do you want to own something when it's paying you a dividend? It's like moving into an apartment house that you rent out to other people. I mean, why bother? I mean, you don't need ownership and direct control in order to profit from the region.
Crimea was totally different in that it's 100% like unanimous that they wanted Russia, but it had military value because that's where the ships are, and it's got a lot of coastline. I imagine that's actually a nice place to be. I don't know.
So let me try and pin you with the last question that I really have is tiny introduction. So obviously, the American system as it stands is sort of crony capitalism or crapitalism can't continue. It can't sustain itself. Anything that mathematically can continue, shockingly, at some point, will not continue. And what do you think is going to happen at some point? We don't have the real numbers, right? There's shadow stats or whatever, which says these are closer to the real numbers, but the real numbers, I'm sure, are very closely guarded secrets about how close we are to the wall in the West, and in particularly in America. So what do you think is going to happen when it's hard to think that there's going to be some big awakening? Most people are reactive rather than proactive. So it's not likely to be some big moral awakening about the non-aggression principle and property rights before that. There is going to be a crisis point. It may be soft or it may be hard, depending on how much the numbers have been withheld from the public. But what do you think is going to happen when the wall does mathematically hit the sort of tottering system at the moment?
Well, I guess if I were to imagine a kind of near-term crisis that we wouldn't just limp along for 200 years in this weird tyranny, if there were a break in, say, the petrodollar and for some reason Saudi Arabia stopped denominating or they were no longer the dominant player in oil, and then all those petrodollars, as many times the number of dollars out in the world as is here, they would flood back, then we have this awful inflation potentially, and we are, I think, a 70% import. Our goods are 70% imported. So we would have to kind of reindustrialize. That would be the crisis that I would guess if one were to happen. And at that point, I think that's why I feel like Ron Paul all he wanted was to spread ideas out. I don't think I've actually heard him say he didn't really want to win presidency. They probably would have killed him anyway. But that he just wanted to get the ideas out there that there should be an alternative, because when the EU, when the monetary union was shaky, which maybe it still is, but the kind of debt crisis 6 years ago, which started there, I remember thinking, well, now they have to realize that this kind of weird union doesn't make sense. You're not better off. And of course, George Soros came out and said, oh, well, the only answer now is political union. We just need to double down on this collectivist idea, this hierarchical structure. And so I keep thinking we're going to have this crisis here, and we're going to have the Second American Revolution, and everybody will remember what we thought in the beginning. But they really are totally poised to have us embrace more socialism. So all we can hope for is what I call the remnants. I think it's Albert J. Knott coined it, where the people who keep the ideas alive and communicate them like us is that I'm not a leader, I'm really a talker, but there are leaders out there who may be able to tap into our dying connection to what these American foundational principles were, which is why things like immigration, education, drugs, welfare, that create this underclass that can't really intellectually understand that just getting a free handout now is not worth it. Like, it's just not worth it. That the liberty is essential to have any control over your future, to have any kind of economic well-being. So I'm just hoping, the only hope would be, I think, but I was always on the 1,000-year plan. That I don't necessarily think that we will be able to do that. That this whole modern state system, which maybe started 500 years ago, I don't know, but as soon, or maybe 8, but that modern state system really has to die in a big way over a long period of time.
Yeah, if you don't learn from reason, you have to learn from bitter experience, and I hope that it will be the former rather than the latter.
I know.
So I wanted to get you to mention to my listeners where people can find your work on the net, when your show is and all that, and your analysis is always interesting and very well-researched and well-expressed. I just wanted to put that pitch in, but if I wanted to share your vital stats.
It's kind of surprising because I'm an anarcho-capitalist on what I guess would be considered mainstream media. I have a show on WSB, which is a talk radio station in Atlanta. My show live is on Saturday, 3 to 6 Eastern. And but I always post it commercial-free on my website, so you don't have to listen to it live unless you want to call in. Just go to my website, MonicaPerezShow.com, and there I probably have 100 podcasts on there already on all sorts of topics. And I do my articles and a lot of book reviews that I think are just, really dense books that we're not meant to really dig into. I like to summarize that for people who actually have to work for a living and don't have time to crack the code on what's really going on in the world. So that's MonicaPerezShow.com. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry to correct you on your own website. I've got it here, TheMonicaPerezShow.com.
Either one works.
Oh, either one works. Okay, good.
Yes,
I just would hate to have people rushing to something that wasn't there. Okay,
yes.
So MonicaPerezShow.com, and you're on Saturdays 3 to 6. And I really want to thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure to speak to, I don't like to call it like-minded people, just minded people, like people who are thinking through stuff.
Totally, just exchanging ideas. I do not need to agree, but thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, take care.
Okay, and let's look at what's going across Drudge right now. Apparently there's a border battle. Agents under attack. Let me see if I can get this load up here. Here we go. Coming out of Fox News, exclusive report reveals disturbing trend of brazen attacks against border security by gangs, drug, and human traffickers. A game warden hit in the head with a rock while trying to seize a raft. Police officers wounded in an hour-long standoff with a gang member wanted for murder. Criminals spewing obscenities and death threats at local cops before asking for and receiving medical treatment. And that was just last week. A weekly report distributed by a Texas state agency to senior law enforcement officials paints a grim picture of the Mexican border, where authorities regularly confront illegal immigrant gang members and draw automatic gunfire from across the Rio Grande, and where local, state, and federal authorities fight a never-ending battle against drug smugglers. The most recent Border Operations Sector Assessment Report, compiled by the Texas Department of Public Safety Borders Security Operations Center, dated July 25th and obtained by FoxNews.com, details local and federal authorities encountering smugglers carrying millions of dollars worth of marijuana, cocaine, and methamphetamine, some of which was found in vehicles filled with biblical passages and religious items. Federal agents being assaulted and shot at, gang members brazenly approaching people in their homes, and ranch workers witnessing men crossing into the U.S. wearing camouflage and carrying long guns and automatic weapons. Again, the drug war is definitely part of that. You're going to have that. You created such a big black market and the potential for, billions of dollars. Yeah, you created that. This whole border issue is just crap because, I have no problem with people coming over here wanting to make a life. Again, why is their country so impoverished? Why is America, a lot of people are going out there, well, this proves why America is, such a great place and how we are, we are special. We're only special because we do things to manipulate other countries. When you understand that, you go, well, maybe we're not so amazing. That's not saying every country could be just as amazing if their cultures don't allow for freedom. But when our own culture is moving backwards, then are we even, remotely going to see anything that remotely resembles freedom in the years to come? And one thing about freedom is if you say, well, I want freedom at home, but not beyond that, just like, well, I want freedom in my house, but when I go out in the street, I don't want other people to have freedom. There shouldn't be freedom out there. That's the same mentality that you get with a lot of the pro-nationalist type people that, they want strong borders. Well, you look at it and you go, well, if you want freedom and you want to spread freedom like you claim, not democracy, freedom, then you can't manipulate other people. You have to allow them to be free. Pitting in puppet governments. We know all this is just crap. It's one of those things that we know what a lot of this is leading up to, and I think it's a transformation of America that is not going to be for the better, and I think they're ready for America to collapse, and not collapse in the way I think we think, but collapse in the way of you having a chance to prosper. One out of Next News Network, Ron Paul warns the dollar collapse.
Hi.
The dollar collapse is close, and we're going to play this.
Thanks for taking a minute to watch this video. I'm Gary Franchi, and as you may know, I've been an avid supporter of Congressman Ron Paul for many years. I even ran the first super PAC that broadcasts his presidential campaign from coast to coast. And when Ron Paul speaks, I listen very, very closely. So right now, I want you to heed his warning in this recent interview he gave to Alex Jones. The Federal Reserve's global hegemony is crumbling. The lines are being drawn by the new BRIC banks, and we as a people need to prepare for what's ahead. Take notes and then use the link below to learn how to prepare for the coming global banking collapse.
You have predicted in your books, you have predicted for decades that the private Federal Reserve would ruin the currency and debase it even faster. Obviously, it had lost 99 cents by now, and a lot of that value since 1913, since we got the private Federal Reserve. A lot of that loss has happened just the last few years. We're seeing an acceleration. Now even mainline economists and analysts are mirroring your breakdown dealing with the end of the dollar. now we see China's yuan exploding. We now see countries from South Korea to Russia moving away from the dollar. Saudi Arabia is starting to move away. It looks like that big event you've been warning about is getting closer and closer. Can you speak to collapse and what's going to happen if the dollar does devalue, sir?
Well, you're certainly right. It's getting much, much closer, and it's not just a few third world countries or, in the past, you've reported on it before, when Iran and Iraq would do it, then they'd get punished. Oh, you can't give up on the dollar, don't take on the dollar. But now it's people like, the Germans aren't all that happy with us. And I saw today that the French are pretty annoyed with us, too, about, how we handle our monetary policy and how we treat the people, with spying on them and all the rest. But this whole episode of with Russia right now over Ukraine, it's probably the stupidest policy conceivable that we want to provoke a war with Russia, put on sanctions, and then they're not going to take that. And then all of a sudden, oh, you mean they can make an alliance with China and India? And they are. It probably takes a little while to do that, but that's what the plan is, and I think the numbers are coming together. I think Brazil wants to be involved with that, and it's a growing effort, because I think there's a build-up hostility with America, because we've been bullying the world, but nobody's been strong enough to take us on, especially since the breakdown of the Soviet system, that we have been the kingpin. So economically and militarily, nobody can say boo. But once they see that our economy is in trouble and they have a chance to do something, they get sick and tired of these sanctions that are put on countries, because we tell them, nope, you can't talk, you can't trade with Russia, you can't do this. Well, I think when we start to slip as we are, I think there's going to be piling on. I think the piling on has already occurred, which means that we're closer to that point where there may be a precipitous fall. You make the right points. The Fed has orchestrated about a 98-99% devaluation already, but it's still a dollar is a dollar today. What if you lose the rest of it and 100% or a large portion of what we have left? That's a big deal. And if you look at all the currency destructions around the world, the end stages go very rapidly. Most people remember now about Zimbabwe dollar, but they only remember the 2 or 3 months that it was in the news. But they had been doing that for a lot of years, and then confidence is lost. There's still enough confidence in the dollar that tomorrow you're not going to read where everybody dumped the dollar. But I think there's central banks now buying up gold. Russia mines it and they keep it. China buys the gold. India's always bought gold, and a lot of other people do. But our banks, the Western banks, the European banks, and of course the United States claim that there's no need for that. We're not going to buy it. But who knows what they're doing behind the scenes? I suspect that they're doing the same thing.
That's right. Zimbabwe went in just the space of a year, about 5 years ago, and it's still bad, from inflation where it took 1 million of their currencies to buy a loaf of bread to $1 trillion. We just showed some of those $1 trillion notes on screen, and their answer was total totalitarianism. And as a historian, as a medical doctor, as a von Mises Institute fellow, I know that you've studied history, but undoubtedly the establishment's rabbit out of a hat is the armored vehicles, the checkpoints, the NSA surveillance. They think authoritarianism is going to hold this together, and their nukes are going to menace the rest of the world. But then our own elite hate America, the old America, the ideas of liberty. They share that with the rest of the world that dislikes our imperiousness. So it's a very bizarre mix of factors where the establishment's trying to shut off our power plants, Cloward and Piven, our governmental system is bankrupting them in a power grab. But I sit back looking at the wide spectrum, and I see the elite undermining their own empire that gave them their power. So it really seems like a evil system that doesn't even know what it's doing, or does it? Can they pull a rabbit out of the hat, Dr. Ron Paul?
No, temporarily they will, but they think they are omnipotent because they get away with it for so long. But eventually, the markets and the people catch up with them. Just yesterday, I don't know if you noticed, there was a hearing in the banking, Financial Services Committee about auditing the Fed. Of course, they wouldn't use my bill to audit, and they bring up with this crazy scheme that they can do it by a formula. And as long as the Fed follows this formula, which is just another form of economic planning, and they did this because the Fed's 100 years old, and they said, now it's time for reform. But they were pretending this was audit, had nothing to do with audit, although they used that language. I sent in my, my dissenting views, and they did take them, and they put them in the record, but they really didn't give it a serious discussion. And the big thing is the Paul Brown, congressman has the bill that I had for a long time. He has 224 co-sponsors, enough to pass the bill, and they wouldn't even bring that bill up and contemplate it. They bring up this other crazy thing of a price rule.
A lot of economists say that it isn't that the Fed doesn't have a policy, they just lie to Congress and the public about what their policy is, and that they're already involved in a controlled collapse right now. And most economists I interview, a lot of them prestigious, say we've really been in a depression since 2008 in most sectors. Dr. Paul, you've given us a pretty accurate prognosis going back decades ago. What do you think our current real economic state is?
Well, I think it's in total shambles, and of course they sort of downplayed that when I said in 08 during the 08 campaign that we were already starting in a recession. Of course, the Republicans were in charge, so that was a really bad thing to say. No, I think certainly for the lower half of our economy, of our people, the middle class and down, they're in a depression. Their standard of living isn't going up. And real income hasn't gone up since the Bretton Woods broke down. Since we went totally off the gold standard, real wages have not going up. Nominal wages do, but real wealth accumulation, goes to the wealthy class deal in Wall Street. And even the Fed, they haven't been shy about saying, well, we are going to interfere. We have a plunge protection team. We have to go in there and protect the markets. Well, all this monetary inflation has gone to the market. But I think ultimately, and I think that's what you're suggesting, will they be able to protect themselves? A few maybe, but there's going to be a lot who have benefited by this. They won't know when to get out either, and it looks very, very shaky right now. I do not believe, now they're saying, well, no more quantitative easing, and we're going to quit by October. But they don't have the biggest idea what conditions will be like in October. But they claim they're going to quit quantitative easing, but they're not going to allow interest rates to go up. Well, that means they're going to print money anyway, and they'll buy something else. It's just that they're not going to buy any more long-term bonds. So they're always in the business of deceiving us.
Exactly, and then that inflates the stock market. That's where the inflation's going, and people think it's really super valued, but it's not. It's actually just bought and devalued dollars. A very dangerous game indeed. Talking to you, who's obviously a very wise man, who's been a Air Force, a medical air corpsman, medical doctor, Congress, author, the whole nine yards. You're a smart guy. If I was sitting there with you on the fishing dock, just between me, you, and the fence post, and I said, Dr. Paul, where do you really think America and the world's going in your gut in 120 seconds? Let's say if you were talking to your grandson and you were giving them advice, really giving them the skinny, what does your gut tell you is going to happen long-term to civilization?
Well, long-term, I'm not as pessimistic as I am short-term. There's no way that the Congress, a president, or a few more members of Congress are in the Senate will all of a sudden be able to reverse this because the momentum is so strong, the debt is so big that, the debt has to be liquidated. The only question how you liquidate debt is you don't pay it, which isn't the case for a country like ours. They always pay it, but they pay it with paper money and devalue the currency. So we're locked in. It's not going to change. We're not going to all of a sudden, let's not go into quite so many wars. Let's wean ourselves off of the welfare state and the warfare state, and let's gradually go back to the gold standard. It's not going to happen. Where I believe is we're quite capable in 5, 10, 20 years from now of having a group of people who have been influenced by everything from radio shows to the internet and all the things going on, Austrian economics, because there's been a tremendous amount of excitement and understanding of the Federal Reserve in the last 5 years. So since ideas do have consequences, it's worked in the past, so I'm holding out with a tinge of hope and conviction that if we keep fighting the battle of ideas, that we will then influence enough people that they will only endorse a government that presents a case of freedom for the individual, get out of these wars, sound money, and maybe paying a lot more attention to the Constitution.
Well, there you have it. Words from Ron Paul. The devaluation of the dollar will continue. Nations have had enough of the Fed's policies. And I've got news for you. Paying down debt with debt doesn't work. Use the link below to jump to the next video and learn how to build your own private gold reserve with real gold money.
Now, like I said, don't ever put all your eggs in one basket. Gold, silver, be very diverse in what you invest in. But, to add to that, the American people are tired of what the Fed has done to the dollar. You can't save up for 10 years and go buy a house. You have to go get a loan, usually, and, pay it off in 30 years for, the everyday person out there. Now, some people have been more successful and been able to do that. But a lot of the laborers out there, that back in the day, well, they could at least save up and get a house, at least save up and get them a car. Nowadays, a car, a house, oh, you better go get a loan. It's unbelievable. People might be getting paid I get paid, $15 an hour, but what the value of that dollar is so small compared to the value of the dollar when you would make $1.25 an hour. We've widened that gap. Ron Paul said one time, when, you could get a dime that was made out of silver, and that was normal currency, you could buy a gallon of gas with that dime. Today, that same dime is still worth a gallon of gas, because that worth of that silver is worth about what a gallon of gas is. That says something about our dollar. And like he said, when we got out off of anything backing the dollar, there was nothing backing the dollar. That's when it declined. And that's why a lot of people don't like Bitcoin. And I understand. And you don't have to invest in it. And like I say, whatever you do invest in, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Be diverse. Everything will be set up to fail. There was one other thing I did want to cover, and I just kind of want to say my little piece about the whole situation. And you can find it at benswan.com. Jesse Ventura awarded $1.8 million in the defamation case. This has been a 2-year fight. This was before Chris Kyle, passed away. And a lot of people are going, well, why would he still go after it? Well, because he did have to clear his name. When you're that public and you're trying to be a voice, and then you get people, trying to slam your name, and they're getting pushed up there as these heroes and the voice when they're lying, and you don't know what else they might be lying about. And it's one of those things that you have to go after it. And you can have your view on it, but he made that choice, and that's his name that he's trying to defend, not yours. Thank you all for tuning in. Take care, and I'll see you Friday. Listen to all the great broadcasts here on UCY.tv.
I waste my time